Good afternoon. My name is Tatiana Bazzichelli and I am the director of the Disruption Network Club. We are an organization in Berlin that is connecting the discourse of technology, politics and society. I'm glad to welcome today the speakers and the audience at the last event of the program Defeating Gender Inequality. This is a program that we have been carrying on together with the Regional Development Hub Caucasus. And this part of the expanding cooperation with civil society in the Eastern Partnership countries and Russia, funded by the German Federal Foreign Office. It is the third year that we have been cooperating with the Regional Development Hub. The first year we developed together the program Hate News versus Free Speech. This was 2020. And last year in 2021 we developed the program Facing Disinformation. All these programs were focusing on the idea of stronger civil society and trying to understand how to make possible to advocate for more democracy and more understanding of the media scenario, both in Germany and in Georgia. We also think that in times of war, like the one that we are experiencing in these months in Europe, is extremely important to support democracy and also to advocate for issues that in these cases often take a back seat. And this, for example, is the case for topics like gender equality, female participation, and diversity in each aspect of life, that are the focus and the main topics of our program, Defeating Gender Inequality. I found very important that the Regional Development Hub had the idea to bring the discourse also female literature and readings to disrupt the negative perception of feminism and feminists in society. And today we will also discuss research studies that they did, and we will try to give a sense of the situation in Georgia. At the same time, we are very glad to create an exchange between Georgia and Germany, and also to support this research by giving an international visibility, organizing these events that has a global outreach. Especially I want to thank Maya Talakhadze, that is the co-founder of the Regional Development Hub Caucasus, for this inspiring cooperation and long-lasting partnership that started already in 2019 when we both participated at the conference We Change, in which we started then developing the idea of this cooperation and this program. So I thank everyone for the participation today, and I'm looking forward to hearing your presentation. Thank you and goodbye.
Good evening from me too. I'm Elena Veljanovska. I'm a curator and senior project manager of the Disruption Network Lab. And I would like to welcome you to the Disruptive Fridays number 32, Defeating Gender Inequality. Also, thank you, Tatiana, quite a lot for your introduction and for giving an overview of the project and what has been done so far. With me in the studio, I have Maya Talakhadze, director of the Regional Development Hub of Caucasus from Georgia, Ekaterine Khositashvili, a researcher from Georgia, and Rasha Khayat, a writer from Germany. Just quickly, behind the scenes with us is today Özlem Kaya, who is taking care of the production, and Agnieszka Troki, who will be moderating the chat online, where you can also follow us. And a huge thanks to Boiling Head Media for the streaming production. For those of you who have joined us on YouTube, maybe I would like to invite you to come to our website, disruptionlab.org/Fridays, where you can also see the chat and interact with it. And as I said, my colleague will be collecting questions, and then at the end, you can, like in the last quarter or 20 minutes, we will see how it goes. You can ask, and then we can collect the questions and ask the speakers from your side. So, as we mentioned, this is the final event of the year, final public event that we have, and it's about rounding up the project that we did with RDH Caucasus, and where we will discuss the current state of gender inequality in Georgia and also the findings of our partners, as well as discuss other ways of approaching feminist issues, such as those through art. So without holding too much, I would like to introduce our first guest, Maya Talakhadze, who is a co-founder and the director of the RDH Caucasus. And she has a legal background, also many years of experience in working in public, private, and civil society organizations of different fields in Georgia and outside of Georgia. But also she has worked on media environment and development in Georgia. For several years, she has also worked as a researcher at the Institute for Development of Freedom and of Information. This is this project, I know that is very close to Maya's heart. So Maya, I would like to ask you in the very beginning, can you tell me more about the current state of female rights in Georgia today? And also, in the same round of question, what made you initiate this project and this research?
Good evening, everyone. Thanks a lot, Helena, for your for presenting me. Before I answer your question, like Tatiana, I would also like to thank you so much for this wonderful cooperation. It's already third year that we are working together, and this is remarkable cooperation of our organizations. And thank you. I would like to thank you personally, Elena, and your excellent team, and Tatiana especially. And also I would like to thank Auswärtiges that is supporting our projects for a couple of years already. In terms of your question, yes, you are right. This project is very close to my heart, and it was a common idea when we started working on the project proposal and what we wanted to do in this particular project. I wanted so much to do this project because there was, when we were working on the proposal of the project, that gender situation was really acute, and we as a team at our organization wanted to do something that would improve the situation a little bit more. In terms of current state of gender inequality, it should be mentioned that there is a patriarchal society in Georgia, and this causes a gender disbalance in many spheres, and we face gender discrimination in many facets. And when we started working on this project, we identified a couple of directions that will be discussed together with our researcher tonight. And there are some discrimination, gender discrimination in the workplace, in economic market. There are also problems in terms of gender, in terms of domestic violence, and there is also a huge problem of femicide in Georgia. When we, as I have mentioned, it is a couple of, actually a year and a half before, like a year and a half ago, we decided to make this project, to work together on it. As Elena mentioned, we had different cooperation history in different topic. It was media polarization and pluralism and disinformation, but then we decided to work in this project, and at that time it was pandemic when we started working on it, and we at home, there was pandemic restrictions, and we, like in Georgia, we were watching almost like once in a week about the very, very bad situation in terms of gender discrimination, in domestic violence, etc. And we decided together at the team to do something for something, very, very particular things in order to improve the situation, what we are facing at that time. At the very beginning, it was a little bit it was a little bit bigger project, and it covered also educational components because it was complex and it was directed to many target groups, not only victims or perpetrators or decision makers, but it was first it was focused also on potential victims and also other women who are not maybe victims or potential victims, but we are trying to empower them somehow. This is very shortly what kind of situation do we have in terms of gender disbalance in Georgia, and also the main reason why we decided to take this project as a cooperational project with Disruption Network Lab. Yes.
Okay, thank you for this. And this leads me to the second question. After you have done now the research, at least, how does this research contribute to the current situation? And what is new that this research has seen now, is offering? Can you just expand a little bit more on that point?
Yes, sure. As I have mentioned, we have comprehensive methodology for this research, and we need to highlight that this research will see daylight very soon, at the end of this month. And in terms of methodology, yes, we decided to we created very carefully the methodology, what kind of directions we wanted to research, to analyze, to find out what is what might be the reason of this kind of gender inequality in many directions and many spheres. And we have four main directions, and actually some of them, for example, especially sexual harassment in the workplace, there was not it is very small period of time that public institutions have obligations to have a mechanism on its workplace, and there is no research. What kind of situation do we have right after implementation of this research? So why I'm saying this one example is that we decided to have something new and to work on the newly occurred challenges and to address it. So the main finding, I would say, that we have found out in the process of research was that actually Georgia has improved gender issues that we had, for example, couple of years ago. But unfortunately, we have seen that situation has been improved only on paper. I am not saying that situation even on the paper is perfect, but I'm just saying that it is much more better situation in terms of legislation, in terms of conducting, implementing international organizations' recommendations. But what we have seen, and what we, not only that we worked on the paper, on the research, but Georgian population, what they watch in TV channels and what they see in news, for example, we have experienced that there is improved situation on the paper in documents, but still the situation is acute. Especially we can talk a lot about gender-based violence and femicide, and it's a couple of days that even more and more number of these femicide cases is increasing. So I would assess it this was a signal of for us and for every member of society that changes on the paper does not change the big picture as such, and there is some other things that needs to be done in order to improve, to have real improvements in this direction.
Thank you, Maya. We will go back to that definitely. Now this is just for the introduction round, so we know who is with us together tonight. I have a comment, but maybe later. I would like to introduce our second speaker, Ekaterine Khositashvili. She's a researcher from Georgia. Currently, she's holding the position of a researcher at RTH Caucasus, but previously she has like a great experience in working for the permanent mission of Georgia to the United Nations Office and other international organizations in Geneva, for example, where she was in charge of human rights and gender equality, health, intellectual property, and sectoral cooperation. And she was covering the office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, the UN Human Rights Council, World Health Organization, and UN specialized agencies. This is just like a short intro from Ekaterina's rich bio. But I would like her to speak more about the research now. So my first opening question, Ekaterina, to you would be maybe to talk more precisely what was the methodology that you have used in this research, and was there something specific in this methodology that is used more for feminist research, or how did you approach the topic in general?
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Elena, for giving me an opportunity to speak and to be a panelist to this event. As Maya mentioned, the purpose of the research was to assess women's rights situation in Georgia, to identify problems and shortcomings, and to develop recommendations based on the findings. And in the research process, special attention from our side was paid to the facts of domestic violence, existing protection mechanisms and the statistics as well, economic equality in terms of gender, facts of sexual harassment in the workplace, in private sector and in public, as well as in public sector. And the fourth main direction was women's participation in the political decision-making process. And as regards the methodology in the research process, both local and international legislation related to gender equality were assessed and analyzed. Also, we sent letters to public agencies, and public information was requested from those agencies. And also, we analyzed, as regards while talking about femicide, we also analyzed decisions of the European Court of Human Rights against Georgia related to femicide cases. And we also used the opportunity to carry out interviews in a closed Facebook group in social network, where we had an opportunity to assess their awareness of women on sexual harassment in the workplace and existing mechanisms and on their rights. As regards the legal framework, I would like to mention that it was very important to analyze commitments of the government of Georgia undertaking under the UN Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination against Women, in which context Georgia has submitted the national report in 2020. And we also analyzed the shadow report presented by the non-governmental organizations to the committee of CEDAW. Another important instrument was Istanbul Convention on Preventing and Combating Violence Against Women and Domestic Violence. Georgia also, to this committee, also submitted national report 2021. Besides, another important instrument was association agreement between the European Union and Georgia, in which the government of Georgia undertook the commitment to ensure gender equality within the country and to ensure equal treatment for women and men on labor market. Several directives of the European Council were analyzed and assessed, and the fulfillment of these directives. And the last one, it was a convention of the International Labour Organization in the context of ensuring equal pay in labor relations for women and men in Georgia. As regards the public information, which was requested from the public agencies, we asked the information from 12 existing ministries in Georgia. And only one out of 12 ministers was not in a position to send us an information. This was the only one, Ministry of Culture, Sport and Youth of Georgia. As I mentioned and Maya mentioned, we in this feminist research we are focused on domestic violence and as well as preventive measures and supportive rehabilitation programs for the victims and survivors. The second was sexual harassment in the workplace. The third one, women's participation in decision-making process on both central and local levels, and women's state on economic market, gender pay gaps, and as well as where we received the data from the respective public agencies about the programs carried out for economic empowered for female beneficiaries. This was our methodology. And then we held and carried out surveys on two topics, which was sexual harassment in the workplace, and the second one was existing protective mechanisms in terms of shelters for the victims of violence. And based on these findings, we elaborated policy recommendations.
I was on. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, there were, I suppose, this goes to my second question, even though, I also read some of the results and recommendations. I realized by guessing some of the challenges you have been facing, but I wanted to ask you maybe directly, like, did you experience any power relations while doing the research? And what were the biggest challenges to attain this information, despite apart from the Ministry of Culture?
Yes, it's worth mentioning that the majority of the public agencies, so 11 out of 12 ministries provided us with the information, and the only one was the Ministry of Culture. So we contacted them several times, and they were saying that they had received our letter and they were going to answer, but we never received requested information. And as regards the general situation with regard to the requesting process of public information in accordance with the decree of the government of Georgia on requesting public information, public agencies are obliged to provide the requested public data in 10 working days. And in case of other ministries, more or less the time limit was properly perceived, and we received this in more or less. Yes, probably in the case of several ministries, we received their answers probably 1 week later, but at least we received the answers. Yeah.
Thank you. We will go back also, we will expand on several issues, but I just wanted to introduce our third speaker, Rasha Khayat. As I said, she is a writer from Germany, but she grew up in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia, and has been living in Germany from the age of 11. She writes novels and essays, hosts the feminist podcast Fempire, Women Who Write, and her first novel, I will read it in English because we are elsewhere now, won her a number of accolades and was translated into multiple languages. She also translates and teaches creative writing, and she also writes for newspapers such as Decide. Rasha is, apart from this short bio, also like a very active person and really opinionated. So I'm really happy to also have you with us in this round, Rasha. So I will also start, we decided not to talk about exact contents of her books, which of course we recommend highly, but to talk more about the person behind the writing. And because I mentioned the podcast Fempire, which also I found really, really extremely exciting. for a start, let's say instead of an introduction, can you tell us a little bit more what made you start the Fempire podcast?
Yeah, sure. Good evening, everyone. And thank you so much for including me in this wonderful panel. It's really interesting. And I have to say, I feel slightly inadequate as an artist regarding Maya and Ekaterine having such important work, which is like doing actual help for women. So I hope my little indulgence of a podcast can inspire a few people also. So I started a podcast. It's called Fempire, which is obviously a play on words on empire and femininity. At the beginning of this year, in January, actually, we went online with the first episode, and it was a little bit of a, let's say, a COVID baby, because we were also disconnected and happening. I was missing the exchange, especially with my female colleagues. And so someone said, yeah, why not like have our conversations in this online space? And the fact of the matter is that in literature, just as in every other aspect of life, men are much more ahead than us women are, in representation and in regards to how much space we are given in newspapers or also on stage, and how we're invited, how our work is perceived. And oftentimes we are not given the space to be amongst ourselves with our work. We have some sort of man explaining to us what we're doing right or what we're doing wrong. And to be perfectly honest, I was so insanely bored and sick of hearing men talk about my work and about my colleagues' work. And I much more enjoy the exchange and talking to my female colleagues, and I benefit a lot from it, and I feel empowered by it, which I guess is also something Maya mentioned, that the question of empowerment was also behind it. To say, okay, I just want to create this space which is solely feminine. And it's not, once a month, I invite a female writer colleague of mine, and it's not about her work per se, but she then brings another female writer, like an idol or someone she has always looked up to, or someone whose work she's always admired, or someone who she feels like inspires and informs her work, or someone she might feel like isn't known enough and she really wants to share with a bigger audience, another female writer. So it's really this triangle about me and another writer talking in terms of literature about someone who's then absent and might also well be deceased. You know, they're like female colleagues of mine who brought writers with them who no longer are with us and who we just feel deserve more space. And I make it a point to not put a limit to my conversations. I try never to make it too long, but I always feel like if we have the space which we can give, then an hour or 90 minutes is fine. It's nothing. And also I love this idea that we are archiving this kind of alternative canon, if you will, you know, because a literature canon is always very male, you know, there are all these white male dead dudes who are considered very important voices. So now we have female writers who are now very successful, like people from very beautiful and amazing Bosnian writer Lana Bastasic, and also German writer Christine Bilka, who was recently shortlisted for the German Book Prize, and people like that, and also writers of color, which I feel very strongly about should be supported, especially female writers of color in this archive, talking about their idols. Like my colleague Karosh Taha, who is Kurdish, is on the recent episode, and she talks about Toni Morrison, and I talk with her about my personal idol Adnan, who's from Lebanon and has passed away last year. And so I'm really hoping to build this kind of continuation of female voices amplifying each other and giving us a sense of power, sense of voice, and changing the way how we see ourselves, that there is an importance and there is a sense of continuation, and that by sharing our idols, we get a sense of these are the shoulders we stand on. Like, we not necessarily stand on these male shoulders that we cannot identify with, that we learned at school school or at university, but we have our own personal female canon that we very much relate to and connect on. And so I'm hoping to expand this to a network that very much resonates also with writers, especially, of course, with readers, with female readers especially, who might then find inspiration and say, oh, yeah, this is someone I have never seen in a bookshop, but I would love to read her work, something like that.
Thank you, Rasha. I mean, this, definitely contributes, at least from these little few podcasts that I was listening to, and of course, I'm planning to listen to more. But contributes in a really passionate way of learning and relearning the female literature history, and capturing it in an oral form, which is also very approachable to people like me, for example, who are not literary critics. But I just wanted to ask you one sub-question, and then we will also go deeper, because we also spoke a little bit about you have a lot of experience also with teaching, with educating groups, also being a person of color yourself, the way you identified it. It's like, how does your personal experience inform your work? It's one part of the question. And then another one would be like, in the same question, what does it mean to be a female writer in Germany, if this is not too broad?
Well, my background, as you already introduced when you spoke in your introduction, is that I am half Saudi. My father is from Saudi Arabia and my mom is German, and I grew up for the first 10 years of my life in Saudi. And so I'm very heavily influenced by the Arabic language, by the Muslim culture. I'm not practicing Muslim myself, but it's a culture that's very much present in my family also. And on top of that, I come from a working class background. So I'm not very classical to be like slotted in the German cultural environment, if you can say, because, the classic German cultural person comes from a very homogeneous, white, often a university educated background. And so I had to work we always say amongst ourselves who are writers of different background, we always say we had to do much more homework, and we still have to do much more homework. Even as kids, we have to do, and even now. So everything I do really is informed by this background and by this perspective and by this kind of, let's say, spectacles that I have on, that I am able to see something else than this very narrow, white, university educated perspective. And so everything I write, my first novel, my second novel, which is going to be published shortly, then another book project that I'm working on also, and my teaching especially, I make it a point to always be involved in workshop contexts that try and include kids from maybe disadvantaged backgrounds and try to again empower them and tell them it doesn't matter if you're passionate, and if you're creative, then it really doesn't matter if your father is a professor or your mother is, I don't know, a housewife or whatever. So I make it a point to really be conscious about that in my work, but also I feel like I don't have to, because it's just what I bring to my work. And what does it mean to be a female writer in Germany? Well, I mean, I guess, it's better than in other countries, but still it's a struggle. It's always being mansplained by journalists. And if you look, like, we have this writer, I don't know, maybe you're going to put this in some sort of comments or something. There's a female writer, she's called Nicole Seifert. She wrote a book translated in German, it's called Frauenliteratur, so women literature. And she really did a lot of research with numbers and everything in terms of how female books are presented, how they are reviewed. She did a lot of numbering. She counted the percentages of female versus male books in every year in the publishing houses programs, and so on. And so this book I think it came out in 2020, and ever since then it's been in the discussion and in the circle, and people are pretending to be very surprised, but to me, it's really not very surprising. My first job was in a bookshop, and so I've been in this business all my life, and it's what you see, men are on the shelves, men are in the newspapers, men are the people who talk about literature. They are the directors of the cultural institutions. Oftentimes they are the publishers themselves. And on the other side, which is really funny, is that readers are mostly female. So a female readership is educated by a male power group, in terms of what they should read and what is important and what should be considered literature, which is completely absurd, which is why us as women, sometimes maybe we feel like, oh, we're not smart enough, or we're not, this is like literature, so I don't get it. But when you like shift your focus on it, and think, oh, okay, so we've been educated by men who also have been educated by decades of men, and the narrative that only white men can write good literature. Of course, we're going to believe this because we learned this at school. So it has been a process of unlearning for me also, unlearning and seeing the system and unlearning it and implementing it then myself, and then again continuing it in my purpose as an educator, in the podcast, whenever I write something for the newspapers, and I sometimes get very angry. This is, I don't know if this answered your question. I expanded a little bit.
Well, the question is big, it can take it can take a lot of time, but I think in general, you tackled on the issues that I was hinting at. So but thanks also, for wrapping, for voicing these needs through your work and literature, and also the writing in the newspapers. I think it's a continuous effort, basically. So just we will make a little bridge, basically, to go back to Maya again and to your research. And it is, this question goes back to you, Maya, because, of course, as we said in the beginning, you are using literature and film created by female writers as part. So one part of the project was the research that you did with Ekaterine, but then it's also expanded for the wider audience to you're organizing film screenings and literature readings. And this is also planned in the future to continue. So can you tell us more about that part of your project and how did that came to be combined?
Yes, thanks, Elena, for this question. I remember when we were working on the design of the project, we were thinking about not only decision makers and policy in this direction, but sometimes the problem is much more deeper than policy making and recommendations that are supposed to be considered by the decision makers. So, like as such, this kind of research has mainly recommendations to the recommendation to the decision maker in order to have that kind of decision that will improve the situation that is really acute. But when we were working on this, as I mentioned, on this project design, we our team has the feeling that we needed something that will be more closer to the woman and more closer to the people as such, not only like sometimes some organizations, some policymakers and some decision makers also make some policies, but it needs somehow to be expressed in art, for example, because it has different kind of influence on people, and also not only women but also men, for example. So we decided at the very beginning that not to have just research that is mainly supposed to be heard and considered by specific persons, for example, decision makers, but also like ordinary people. So we decided to have literature nights and also film screening that would be focused on feminist issues. So the first event that we have conducted, it was back in November. It was first feminist literature night within the project, and our guest was a feminist, very famous Georgian feminist writer Tamtamilashvili, and the audience and discussion after this meeting highlighted that, as Rasha mentioned, we have found out that the readers of the feminist literature are still women, because we maybe we have this kind of how to say understanding to each other, and we are like we like it more. But the case is that like the voice of women who are victims of, for example, domestic violence, or who have different gender problems, I would say, different problems like men have, for example, we need to hear their voices, not everywhere. So since we are working, since we are reading literature, we are watching movies, like we need to highlight these issues everywhere. So this part, like film screening and literature night, gave our project more humanity, I would say, because we are talking about absolutely different issues like then we wrote in the research. So I would say that this part is very important. And Rasha mentioned in her speech that me and Ekaterine, we are working we are doing very important job. But I would say that Rasha and other writers who are working on feminist issues in their literature, in their podcasts, in their these kind of things, they are doing much more important job, I would say, because we, at the end of the day, we need to talk about and to think about more. And I would add one more thing, that when we had this feminist literature night and this film screening, we also had at the end evaluation form that we distributed to the participants, and majority, I would say absolute majority of the participants said in their evaluation forms that now they are thinking more and more deeply on this issue. So this was our main goal in this in having this part in our project, because I personally, I'm not talking it like from the perspective of project manager or something like that. I'm just saying as Maya Talakhadze, as one person. I always, not always, but very often I face the challenges that are connected to expression of women, of their rights. They have problems of understanding what kind of problems there is in terms of gender difference in many fields, I would say. And they think that they identify they identify as an issue, as a fact, but sometimes they think that it is normal. So we need somehow to work closer and to them and work, how to say, more deeper, and to go deeper. Literature and art is very good, I would say, very good instrument to face it. So this was the, I would say, in our project, it was kind of experiment, because as I mentioned before, our project was initiated when it was pandemic, and all of the activities that project has was thought and like discussed in the pandemic. So this project, like these activities, was absolutely online. It was like Zoom link, and the participants, we are discussing these issues in closed groups, and all of them also identified that they would rather attend like in-person meetings, because they these Zoom meetings and the online meetings are not as such like well, it works well, and pandemic showed that it worked, but still people preferred to meet to each other and to discuss it much more in details, and to see this person like authors in person, and to interrogate, like to have discussion in person. So I would say that this experiment that we put this direction also in our project worked very well, and I'm really proud of it, and I'm really happy that audience, we are very, very interested in it, and I would assess it as an how to say, as a success. Yes.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, this is really, I would just comment, it's, I don't think it goes one without the other, research, and then, goes back and forth. When we talk about feminist literature, it's always a little bit more informed, and it's, even the fiction can be actually not so fictional oftentimes. As we were discussing with Maya when we were organizing this event today, I would like to invite you now to take the wheel of the moderator a little bit, because you also wanted to ask a few questions to the speakers.
Yes.
And then I get back. I just have to say that I'm just receiving a lot of messages that we have questions from the audience. So I'm really excited to read them now in the meantime.
Yeah,
The floor is yours,
thank you,
Maya.
Elena. Yeah, many thanks to giving me the floor. But I see that Rasha wants to respond, and I would give her floor, and then we continue talking on the main findings of our research. Rasha, floor is yours, please.
Thank you so much, Maya. I really loved what you were saying about the part of your project that included film screenings and readings, because what I really just wanted to add as from the perspective of a writer myself, and mainly, I guess, also as a reader, like as a lifetime reader, and I read mainly fiction. I mean, nonfiction has only been part of my life for the last, let's say, decade or so. And I really do believe that we need to change the narrative that we have been fed as women by male written literature, that we as women, we are weak, and we are oftentimes victims, or if we're not victims, we're the muses, and oftentimes we get used. And then if we're a little bit stronger or smarter, then we're difficult, and we're never going to get married, and everybody's going to hate us, and all of this. And we have to sort of make ourselves, we have to remember that this is a story that we were told over and over and over and over again in films, in literature, from the time that we were very little. And I feel that we need female stories for us to mirror back our experience as women, as girls, as mothers, as daughters also. And these can be all kinds of stories. These can be stories, very simple stories about female friendships, which is a great thing for girls to empower and to see myself in the story, or for mothers, or for a daughter who has her mother dying, all these perspectives and parts of women's lives, abuse, of course, is domestic abuse or whatever, and these are all spaces that fiction can fill in blanks and can fill in questions and confusion that we have because we were fed these male narratives about ourselves, that we think, oh, we always have to be the muses, we always have to be demure and nice, and friendly. We don't, it's who says? And I really do feel that by giving, in your project, giving the space to art. John Didion once said, we need stories in order to survive. No, we tell ourselves stories in order to live. And I feel like this is the motto, we need to sort of remember that we really need stories. This is where literature and art can help for us to see ourselves and to empower ourselves and to empower our kids, because you also have to empower young boys to see that women are not the demure little victims, you have to tell boys that women and girls are awesome, and that they're strong and that they can do things. And only by this we will change, I think, slowly the course that our world is going. This is really what I just wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Rasha. Thank you so much. The only thing that I would add here is that exactly, I agree absolutely, because when we are defining who might be the focus group in our project, and as I've mentioned from the very beginning, our project was much more bigger than it was cut because of kind of administrative issues that we hope that it will continue, and our activities will be conducted also next year. But in terms of focus group, male, like men were also as a important group to whom this project was directed. As you mentioned, yes, first we need to empower women in many directions, but at the same time we need to teach boys, and we need to show men at least what is supposed to be done in terms of equality, at least, and what kind of issues do we have in terms of literature and movies. There is no kind of ready recipe what to do, but it gives us kind of motivation, kind of interpretation. What can we do in order to live in a better world, at least? Yeah, thanks a lot once again. We will get back to you and to the artistic part of our project. But before, I would like to get back to Ekaterine and to ask a little bit more about the research, because it really showed the issues that really needs to be discussed, and to be to give it closer to decision makers and to institutions and public institutions. I would start with sexual harassment in the workplace, because this was one of the main direction, as Ekaterina mentioned already. It was one of the in our methodology, one of the part and one of the main direction of gender inequality was sexual harassment. And I would ask you, what kind of situation do we have in Georgia in the context of sexual harassment in the workplace? And I would ask it, we worked with public institutions, so with ministries, because of this scope of research. But I would ask you also about private sector and about private job market. What kind private business, maybe, for example? What kind of situation do we have here? What our research says in terms of this? Thank you. Floor is yours.
Thank you, Maya, for you mentioned that sexual harassment in the workplace is a widespread hidden problem in Georgia, and it has shown that it's really crucial problem therein, and the victims of which are mainly women, and it is a significant obstacle to achieving equal opportunities in the workplace. According to the Labor Code of Georgia, harassment in the workplace, including sexual harassment, is a form of discrimination that aims or causes harm to a person's dignity and creates an intimidating, hostile, and insulting environment. And now, currently, the legal framework and existing mechanisms in Georgia provide protection for victims of sexual harassment in the workplace, but the rate of sexual harassment appeals is still low. I already mentioned that within the framework of international and regional commitments, including the harmonization process of the European Union directives of the European Union and Istanbul Convention and UN Convention and CEDAW, a number of legislative changes were made in Georgian legislation to regulate sexual harassment in the workplace, but still we have mechanisms and tools for responding to incidents, but the rate of reporting is too low. As regards the public sector, I would mention that, as I previously mentioned, we received data on existing mechanisms from the 12, we sent requests to 12 existing ministries in Georgia. And to date, internal sexual harassment complaint mechanism has been implemented in only 5 ministries out of 12, which is Ministry of Environment, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Ministry of Defense, Ministry of Regional Development, and Ministry of Economy. And in some of the ministries, the Ministry of Internal Affairs and Ministry of Education, there is a process of implementation of sexual harassment mechanisms, and the mechanisms have not created in Ministry of Civic Equality and Reconciliation and Ministry of Justice. And as I also mentioned, we have not received any information on existing mechanism and also data on sexual harassment reportings from the Ministry of Culture. As a result of the public information received from the ministries, it revealed that the victims of sexual harassment used the complaint mechanism in the agency, in the ministry, which is a Ministry of Defense of Georgia, where regular and mandatory trainings on sexual harassment prevention and response are carried out. So, according to the data provided by the ministry, this year only 2 cases were reported on sexual harassment. And also it should be mentioned that these cases were reported in a manner of confidential way. So we can point out that there is a huge importance to have a confidential mechanisms and the need for the sexual harassment training in public agencies. And as regards the private sector, in case of private sector, the victims of sexual harassment in the workplace have the option of seeking a response through the if does it exist internal complaint mechanism, or they can also ask for the involvement of the public defender's office or the court. In case of the public defender learns about the case, it gives the recommendation to the employer regarding the fact of the sexual harassment, and if the recommendation of the public defender is not implemented, in this case, public defender has a right to appeal this situation before the court. And demand the implementation of this recommendation by the certain entity or enterprise. And as regards the cases, in the case of public service, we had only 2 cases in case of Ministry of Defense. And as regards the private sector, we have it is public information, which was published on the website of the Public Defender's Office, and we have had number of cases in private sector where Public Defender's Office were able to learn about the case and issue a recommendation. So. Victims have 2 options in private sector to address the PDO's office, and for the employees of public sector, existing mechanisms, internal mechanisms play an important role. Yes, and the finding of this research was that. People feel comfortable when there is an internal mechanism in a company or in an agency, public agency, and they have an opportunity to report in a manner of confidential way. And as regards the situation right now, as a result of the UN Women's survey, 2 out of every 5 women employed in public service have experienced sexual harassment in the workplace. But if you consider our survey, which was held in a Facebook group, in a closed group, even though the people were hesitant to participate in the survey, we found out that people do not know about the existing mechanisms, and the awareness of existing internal complaint mechanisms is too low. So this was the finding, and also it also revealed the survey that there is a need of trainings, regular trainings and obligatory trainings in each public agency, in public sector. And in case of private sector, it's a voluntary. So it's up to the private company to decide to organize a electronic learning course on sexual harassment for employees.
Thank you so much. Yes, I would add here that this two cases that we have discussed, Ekaterine discussed right now, and we have already discussed it a couple of times when we are working on the research. These two is from the period when these public institutions have established internal mechanisms, and these internal mechanisms are really new, and it just started last year, 2021. So since it is very alarming that since different research, already conducted research, say that two from five people, two from five women is a kind of victim of sexual sexual harassment. Only two cases out of 12 ministries is identified as such, and it is like it says something about need of raising awareness, and not only. Sometimes they are hesitant to speak about it, and to avoid some kind of stigma in it. I would ask you one more question to answer very shortly, because I see that time is running, unfortunately, really quickly. And I would ask you one more question about domestic violence, and if you tell us what kind of situation do we have right now, because I'm sure that Georgian audience is watching us right now, and we had couple of weeks ago, in 1 week, we had very alarming situation, like all of the news agencies and all of the TV channels and all of the media outlets, we are talking about these femicide issues, and that is the like most I would say dangerous aspect of gender discrimination. And could you tell us a little bit more about gender-based violence, in like domestic violence, and also femicide that our research has been highlighted? But yeah, one more time, a little bit shortly, because we need to somehow watch out the timing. Thank you.
Thank you, Maya. As regards to domestic violence, I will briefly mention that to fight against domestic violence and violence against women, at legislative level, the government has made significant progress in its legislation, including establishment of mechanisms to ensure gender equality and to improve the situation. Though there are still numerous challenges that must be addressed by various agencies. I fully agree with you that the cases of femicide just happened recently. It's really alarming. But if we consider the data, for last 5 years, femicide cases, the case of femicide was really noticeably decreased because of the legislative changes, and also because of the reforms in the prosecutors office of Georgia, and amendments in the legislation. I would mention the existing mechanism, which is a administrative legal mechanism to respond to violence against women and domestic violence, which is issuing a restraining and protective order, as well as establishing electronic surveillance of the abuser, because from domestic violence there is only one step to femicide. So it's good and positive development that the government is aware of this problem, and together with the legislative changes, the strategic communication is actively carried out, especially during the COVID-19. It was very actively carried out through the social media, through the TV channels, through the Facebook pages of the governmental institutions. So everything was done to avoid the femicide. But in terms of femicide, we can say that as far as much as we have still progress at legislative level, the number of criminal proceedings in case of domestic violence, and you will see on the infographic, it's noticeably increased. And at one hand, it's because of the priority of the government that pays much attention to the domestic violence and violence against women. But and on one hand, it's really alarming that it's quadrupled in recent 4 years. So in comparison to 2015, the number of criminal proceedings on domestic violence are quadrupled. And as regards their restraining orders, it's really increasing. You will see on the infographic as well. But due to the new mechanism which was introduced in the Ministry of Internal Affairs, which is a monitoring mechanism for evaluation of violence risks and execution of the conditions of the restraining order, the violations of restraining orders, number of violations is decreasing. So we can find something positive in these numbers as well. And as regards the prosecutor's office who works on domestic violence and femicide cases, today, since 2018, specialized prosecutors and investigators been working in the office and have the authority to participate in domestic violence crimes. And today there are 209 prosecutors specialized in this field, and they also work on campaigns, and so they work in the field of violence against women, and that's a result of the increased criminal proceedings as well, I think. That's the situation right now, and I will just briefly mention the preventive mechanisms, such as existence of shelter for victims of violence and survivors. And there is a hotline available for victims, which is also accessible for ethnic minorities. And there are shelters of victims of violence available in 5 regions in Georgia. Although the number of beneficiaries are limited, they still have an opportunity to apply for psychological or any other psychological assistance or etc. So they ask for the legal assistance or receive medical services therein. That's a capacity of the shelter, but at the same time, briefly, I will mention the data for last 3 years about the beneficiaries of the shelter. 2020, approximately 325 women applied for the shelter service. 2021, the number was almost the same. And this year, if we consider the period from January to August, approximately 245 women applied for the shelter service. And shortly mentioning this, capacity of the shelter does not respond to the we think that does not respond to the number of number of victims of domestic violence, and recommendation would be to give them more opportunities, and which was revealed in our Facebook survey. The awareness of the shelters is too low. So people know about the hotline, people know about the, respondents know about the hotline, about the restraining orders, but they do not have any information on electronic surveillance and also existing shelters in Georgia.
Thank you, Ekaterine. I would add here, just for the audience, like foreigner audience, that the population in Georgia, according to the statistic, is 3.7 million, sorry, not billion. We are a really small country here. And this is the information just to realize what the proportion and portion of the shelters that, as Ekaterina mentioned, has a limited capacity to face the challenges that we have in terms of domestic violence and in gender-based violence as such. Thank you once again. I see that our audience is really active, and I would give Elena the floor to read it out and to ask this question to the persons. But before, I would like to get back to Rasha and to get back also to my question that is connected to the gender of the readers, of our customers, I would say, in terms of gender literature and gender product, I would say. Sometimes it is literature, sometimes it is podcast, sometimes it is movie, etc. And I would like to know your opinion, if you have like in mind something in order to have also male readers, like to increase somehow the number, because I'm asking this, as I have mentioned, I understand and I feel when I read and when I see movies, I feel what kind of force, like not force, what kind of influence it might have on people, like on readers. It doesn't really matter what kind of gender is it, like they are man or woman. But when personally I was working on this project, and when I found out that the real voice of women we are hearing from literature, and we are hearing from movies, like the roots of the problem. We are seeing it very like on the hand and in daylight. It was really disappointing for me finding out that not many men reads and watch movies and literature that are like with the spirit of feminism and with the spirit of women empowerment, for example. And I would ask you, what might be the reason of this gender disbalance in the audience, and what might be possible to be done in order to increase also male audience in this sphere?
Yeah, thank you, Maya. It's a very good question. I'm trying to keep it brief because I see that we're running out of time. I think we have two problems here. On the one hand is what I mentioned earlier, the fact that there is this decade-long narrative that men are the shit, if I may say so, and they are the people who tell us what to think. And I recently had this experience in a reading of a friend of mine. It was a feminist reading also in a big literary institution in Hamburg. And the audience was almost exclusively female, and there were 3 men in the audience, in an audience about, let's say, 60 people. And at the end of the event, there's always a question and answer with the audience. And the very first person who wanted to ask a question was one of the 3 men. So it's not like the women, it's the men who stood up. And the question he asked was, do you think it's a problem that your literature is being marketed as feminist? Because it's not interesting to me. And so I feel that this is really nothing I can do anything about, or my friend who was on stage can do anything about, or the people who conducted this evening. It's really this guy's problem, and it's the men's problem in general. If they're not interested, then I'm sorry, I can't help you. Then look away. I'm not going to market it differently. He's basically saying, brand yourself differently, so I'm interested. And I'm saying, if you want to learn, if you want to educate yourself as a man, the internet is out there, books are out there, films are out there. If you're not interested, then okay, then go and continue watching Terminator or whatever you enjoy. I don't know. As I mentioned earlier in my speech about the podcast, I'm really, really, really sick of listening to them and of having to modulate my work, my kind of talking and my kind of thinking, so they might be interested. I really don't care anymore at this point. I feel like most readers, like if my readings, for example, and also my audience for the podcast is almost exclusively female. I can see I have Vampire on Instagram, and people who share it also is almost exclusively female. I know for a fact that I have like a handful of male fans, and of course, it would be nice. Men would be more interested, but I cannot make them more interested, because I feel like everything these women have to say, everything my female colleagues have to say is really interesting and really important. And if they don't think so, then I cannot help them. It's really up to them to broaden their horizons. And if they don't feel they're interested in something that's feminist, really, I can't. I think we have to. I personally feel I would like to stick to empowering and making women more confident in order to raise their voices and to state what I have to say is important. And I really don't care. Like, for decades, men didn't care what women thought about their writing. Why should I care now what men think about my writing? So that's really like my philosophy on it.
Thank you. Thank you both and all, and Maya for taking over. I was just checking the questions that we are receiving, and I guess the first one I wanted to follow up was, I feel like a strong polarization here now. So let's see whether there is the similar understanding of this question, or but no, this is really going in a different direction. I found it very interesting. So to Ekaterine and Maya, it's to the three of you, but like a different aspect. Have you found allies among the men in Georgia that you have worked with, apart from those that are, criticizing constantly? And to Rasha, what is the feedback from males, especially on social platforms? So there is a negative feedback. If there is also you can just share if you want to additionally share if there is a positive feedback, because the negative we heard already, and couldn't agree more. So this would be the first question to all of you.
I can keep it really brief because, like I said, I'm not engaging in a lot of social platforms anymore. Like 3 years ago, I deleted my Facebook and my Twitter and everything because it's very bad for my mental health. And the podcast is only on Instagram. If you want to follow it, it's Vampire Space Podcast. But I haven't received any male criticism openly to myself. Only the fact that, when I meet male colleagues, they're like, "Oh yeah, I heard you're doing a podcast now. Yeah, I'll listen to it at some point." It's like, whatever. And at the same time, I have a few male colleagues who really helped also, especially in the technical aspects. And they were like, they're fanboys, and I applaud them, and I shout out to them. And so there are male writers and academics who are fans and who like it and who think it's important. And maybe they can bring their friends. And other than that, I haven't have been fortunate enough to haven't received a whole lot of backlash from men. They just don't listen, I guess.
Yeah, I would add here in terms of the male allies in Georgian society, and I have to point out that I feel the difference, and I will tell you what I mean. Not similar to Russia. I use social networks still, and Facebook is very popular in Georgia, and we are almost the Facebook lately plays a role of news agency, and I am getting a lot of information from Facebook. And since I have mentioned that it is very popular, almost everyone in Georgia has Facebook, and they write there and they share their opinions, their views, etc., etc. And I see recently I have this kind of feeling that some male friends, some men and some even youngers, they their posts, their beliefs, their opinions that are spread and that are shared on Facebook, it is much more much more gender sensitive, I would say. That means that some years ago, situation is such, like when you're scrolling your Facebook, for example, it was absolutely like kidding and smiling on this or that issues that was kind of connected to gender aspects. But I also have to say the influence and the force of training programs. From the very beginning, Elena mentioned my background, and I also worked previously in public institutions as well, and to sometimes from time to time I'll also work with them, and I had this kind of observation, what kind of influence does gender training have. And it is very new, something new that was developed recently, like couple of years. It's already a couple of years that it is very normal. Georgia is a developing country, and we are having a lot of developing projects that are funded by international financial institutions, and sometimes they have this kind of obligations to have to raise awareness in terms of gender, in terms of other social issues, and these kind of trainings are obligatory. So even though it is somehow from the very beginning, when the training starts, some men start to say some jokes or not accept is seriously, I would say at the end of the training you feel the difference. So what I want to say in terms of the allies of women, of men, I have to say that at least I see the difference, and I also see a lot of feminist men in my bubble. I'm saying bubble because we have not done a kind of big and overwhelming research of for example, focus group or something like that. I'm saying it from my personal experience and from my personal bubble, I would say. So yeah, I see it. And I cannot say that there is antagonist groups in Georgian society, like men and women. There are also men who have feminist thinking, and who think that equality is very important, and all gender should have similar accessibility to any kind of to anything that is supposed to be available for human beings. Yeah, that's it from my side.
Oh. Still, we're thankful to them as well for existing and contributing to these issues. And I have now quickly one last question for Ekaterine, which I also find quite relevant. How active are women in Georgia in terms of economy, from the economic point of view?
Thank you for the question, Elena. As regards the economic activities of women in Georgia, firstly, I would mention that 52% of Georgian population are women, and the same percentage of women have higher education in Georgia. But as regards to the employment and rate and the number of female entrepreneurs in Georgia, today approximately 29.7% are women entrepreneurs, and approximately 59% are men. So it means that the main sector of employment for both women and men is different, and women are mostly working in the field of education, healthcare, and retail trade, and men mostly work in industry, transport, and communication. And according to our research and the finding, we found out that there are areas where women do not have skills, and they are not able to enjoy the benefits from the state programs. Here, I also would like to mention 3 main programs which are provided by the government to strengthen and to promote economic empowerment of women in Georgia, which is the one Small and Medium Enterprises program organized by the Enterprise Georgia, and the agency has a strategy to ensure gender equality and to finance the same amount of female candidates and applicants as men and as male candidates. And according to this policy and strategy, approximately 45 to 51% of applicants are women, but it only concerns the small and medium entrepreneurship. And as regards the in this program, it's really worked. The priority and policy really worked, and so women entrepreneurs became beneficiaries of the program, which has been provided since 2015. And as regards to supporting agriculture and strengthening capacities of women and female farmers, only 59 agricultural cooperatives are members of cooperatives are women. And it's also mentioned and outlined on infographics. You could see the number of and gender distribution of cooperatives there. And the third program, which is provided by the Georgian Innovation and Technology Development Agency, which has also been running from 2015. We can say that even though they have the same, the women and the men are equal to apply for the programs and for the grants, co-financing grants there. To only 20% or 21% of beneficiaries were women in this program. So it's really noticeable the low rate of women participants in high technology programs there. And we also found out that there is a lack of digital skills and technical knowledge of women. Even 52% of women in the country has graduated from the university and has a higher education. According to I would just conclude by our recommendation in response to the existing situation of women in economic state in the country, is that the government should provide specialized pilot programs for women, which will be designed according to their skills and promote their ideas and their entrepreneurial activities according to the areas where they are specialized. And another issue was the access to the finances and access to the real estate, because of the customary tradition. I would say in Georgia, women are not inheritants of the inheritance, and we asked for the information from notary chamber, and it revealed that the Chamber of Notaries does not process data, gender-based data on inheritance. So if the women have enough financial resources or real estate to ensure and to help to receive the loans from the financial institutions, it would encourage them to start business, and their number would be increased in terms of women entrepreneurs. This is the situation right now.
Thank you, Ekaterina. And I just want to tell the audience, like very soon, all these details in much precise detail will be shared, and this will be the next step of the project. So people can also see the graphs, check the whole research that you did, and then also the recommendations for following steps, what can be taken to implement these measures and improve the current situation. So at this point, since we really went a bit over time, I would just like to thank all of you. I will just say the order here on my screen. Thank you, Ekaterina, Rasha, and Maya for going, really like giving us all these in-depth experiences, and regarding the project, but also regarding your work, Rasha, as well. So I'm really sad that a lot of questions that I've prepared are also unanswered, but I guess this we will have to leave for the next time. So thank you for taking part into these Disruptive Fridays. And I would just like now at the end to just tell you about our next events, the next conference that we will have in March from 24th until 26th of March at Kunstquartier Bethanien in Berlin. And on streaming, we'll be focusing on smart prisons, tracking, monitoring, and control. And it's focusing on investigation of recent developments in the creation of prisons and detention centers, but also on technical and ethical implications of tracking, monitoring, and control. This is also going in depth into the topic of prisons. And for the very end, I would like to invite you to check our membership card. This is something that we just introduced now in November. If you want to become a member and support our work, because we constantly need a little bit of support to keep on doing what we know best. So you have different levels of participation, whether 1 year access to all events, that you can get for 50 euros, or half price for your friends, or simply our love. So I just invite you to take a look at the membership card, and it could be good for you, or maybe as a present to some of your friends. And at the very end, I would like to thank our audience for being with us throughout the year, and say that this is our last public event for this year, and wish you all nice holidays and a really happy start in the new year. Goodbye from me.